Howdy, everybody. I'm Robert Wilonsky, the Communications Director at Heritage Auctions, and I am thrilled to be joined by Curtis Lindner, the Director of Americana here at Heritage Auctions. And of course, you know why you're here, to hear us talk about the state of the Americana market, look back at some sales recently, and to look forward to some that are upcoming in the next year. But mostly, Curtis, I'm here to ask you a lot of questions about American history.
It's fine with me.
Look, part of the reason I came to Heritage a year and a half ago is
because of me?
Sure, let's go with that.
Okay, I'd like to go with that.
I want to go with the fact that I can hold, touch, be around, and learn about American history.
Mm-hmm.
Heritage, after all, does bill ourselves as America's auction house. So whether it's American art, comic books, baseball cards, American history is what we specialize in, and you are the specialist in that particular category. So I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you.
If you have a question for Curtis, feel free to just drop it in live, or you can email it anonymously, if that's how you'd like to do it, at tommyn@ha.com. Tommy Noel, the man who's directing today's show, will make sure that we get that question. There it is right there at the bottom of your screen, tommyn@ha.com. So you just had a sale in September.
Yes.
Did extraordinarily well. We'll cover some highlights from that.
Okay.
But I had a real quick question for you, because I always think it's kind of interesting for folks who may not necessarily know our experts at the beginning of these conversations. I did want to ask you how you got into this. I mean, we all study American history. We all fall in love with particular moments, personalities.
Right.
I'm just kind of fascinated how it is that this became the thing in which you specialize. It's
a good question. No one else in my siblings don't collect anything. My mother did. My father didn't, but my mother did, and I must have got the bug from her. And when I was young, I collected coins, stamps, really didn't collect political material. I didn't know much about it at the time.
Yeah.
So I was a young collector, as 10, 11, 12 years old. And in my early 20s, I found a political button. And I said, this is pretty cool. So I started collecting political items. And that led me, I didn't get into this business as a dealer or working for an auction house right away. I worked your typical jobs in marketing and things like that. And in 2000, I said to my wife, I said, I think I want to buy and sell this stuff for a living.
Really?
And
it's just that sudden.
Yeah, I'd say it was.
Yeah.
I think she was a little shocked. She was very nervous, which I think most wives or other spouses would be. And I had a pretty successful run for about 19 years. And I was approached by Tom Slater in the spring of 2019 about coming to Heritage. I came down and met with the executives. I liked what I saw. And I've been here since July of 2019.
Do you remember the first, you say you got a political button. What was it for?
It was John Kennedy.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, you grew up in Dallas. Certainly Kennedy is a big part of my life.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you know, my mother was actually the x-ray tech at Parkland Hospital that day.
Wow.
So
that is...
her oral history is at the 6th floor museum.
Very interesting.
So my whole life has been tethered to Kennedy in one way or shape.
She was there when the president was brought in?
She was.
Wow.
My father was at Love Field when he arrived. My mother was at Parkland. My parents did not yet know each other.
Wow.
So I've got a lot of stories I can tell you afterwards.
I bet.
Maybe you can interview me later for a second.
I think I will.
So I want to talk about what the last 18 months have been like.
Right.
Because
certainly,
and this is really kind of one of the things we talk about in these particular discussions, the state of the market, right? So I think everybody thought in March of 2020, things were going to go south.
Yeah.
And in fact, what we saw and other auction houses across the world have seen is that actually people got really comfortable bidding online.
Right.
And they fell in love with, nostalgia has sort of been a thing we've talked about in some way, shape, or form. And certainly when it comes to video games, comic books, baseball cards, nostalgia plays a big factor into this. But I'm sort of wondering what the change in the last year and a half in terms of people's habits have done for Americana, in as much as I started reading more American history books. I started delving back into nonfiction and learning more about this country. Certainly the last few years have made me want to sort of understand the past to know more about the present and where we're headed. And I sort of wonder if that's been an impact on you as well.
Well, I mean, I can tell you in February and March of 2020, like all of us at Heritage and other companies, we were a little nervous about what's the future. Because, people, if you really think about it, do you pay your mortgage payment or buy a Lincoln Ferrotype?
Right.
And people were losing their jobs. So, I think up and down the whole hierarchy of Heritage, we were a little concerned. But the company, now that I look back, was well positioned for this virus. Our great internet platform, ease of bidding. We were still getting great material. Another thing that happened, there were no shows to go to.
Right.
So dealers could not, unless they were doing private transactions, couldn't set up at shows. So a lot of them consigned to us. People who never bid with Heritage or never bid in an auction before reached out to Heritage and became bidders, and they're current bidders. So we've grown our base of bidders and also our consignor base. And at the end of 2020, we had a record year. And the trend has kept going. I think we're going to have a record year at the end of 2021, and I don't see it ending soon at all. I think this wave is going to continue. I think people have just gotten, again, used to bidding on the internet, sitting there on the couch, bidding live with Mike Sadler or whoever's doing the auction. And of course, now they can come live if they wish. But I think our platform and the way the company was positioned really got us through that tumultuous very beginning of the virus.
You know, I want to talk about, we'll talk about sales, but I also want to talk about consignments. Did you find that over the last year and a half, that as people were home more, that they were going through their collections and going, oh, I didn't realize I had this, now may be the time to part with this, and that things were coming to market that you had not seen before and really were eager to see and to be able to offer? Yeah,
in the last sale, we had some amazing pieces, and they were consigned to us by, it was a very good friend of mine from Connecticut. And I think he saw it was the right time to sell because the market was doing very well. And it shows in the numbers. One of the pieces was a John Wilkes Booth reward poster. We set an auction record at $275,000.
Yeah, let's go ahead and show that, Tommy, because this was the lead item in the sale on September 24th and 25th. This sold for $275,000, which set the record.
Yeah, the prior auction record that I could find was $214,000, and that was earlier this year. So we were really pleased.
So to what do you account the fact that this actually bested the record by about $60,000? I mean, I don't think that you expected that before this auction happened.
I did not. I thought it would get up into the mid to the high 100s. But I just think we presented it well. We marketed it well. And we had active bidders who really wanted an example. Most of these are in museums. There's only a handful of these broadsides or posters out there in this variety. There's smaller examples out there, but if you're going to own a John Wilkes Booth reward poster, this is the one to have. And it was showed by the bidding.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the history of it, because I having seen this, and Tommy will bring it up here on the screen in a second, obviously, we know the story behind it. It is certainly the most famous manhunt in American history. And as we look at it, as I saw it in person before I went to auction, and I was stunned by the condition in which it remained. I assumed that only a handful remain in that condition, if even that. How does something like this survive this long to be, I mean, when you stand there and you hold it in the light, it looks like it was made yesterday.
Well, this piece, like most posters or broadsides from this era, have something called rice paper on the back. It keeps the piece stable. So of course that helps. But the condition otherwise, there was very little loss. What I mean by loss, very little original paper missing. You know, this is an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, even better. It's much better than many examples I have seen. And it's iconic, you know, for one of the biggest tragedies in our country's history. This piece represents that period of time.
You know, it's interesting. I think I told you my son had a replica of this hanging in his room for years. I mean, it was something that he bought at the Smithsonian. It's something the Smithsonian sells replicas of. It is iconic in that sense. We've seen it everywhere. We certainly know the story behind it. And that's sort of the thing that interests me about your category. You know, it's one thing to own a baseball card of your favorite player, or a comic book. Certainly it's Superman's first appearance, Spider-Man's first appearance, and so forth, or drawn by a favorite artist. You have the ability to do what few categories here do, which is to sell a moment, to sell the significant moment in American history. When something like this comes up, are people buying it for that reason? Are they buying it because it's one of the few? Are they buying it because they want it, that connection to Lincoln? They want that connection to that piece of American history?
It could be a combination of all those things. You know, someone who collects, general collector of Abraham Lincoln and has the wherewithal would certainly want that in their collection. Then you have specialized collectors who only buy campaign items. You have people who only buy assassination items. And anybody who buys assassination material, if they have the wherewithal and can afford it, would certainly be going after this. So it could be a combination of all.
Tell me about people who collect assassination material, because I'm fascinated by that.
it's been a cottage industry since Lincoln died.
Yeah.
They cut up pieces of the pillow. There was several pillows used at the Peterson house because of his wound.
Right.
They were stained. Those were cut up and given out as souvenirs. Pieces of bed sheet were cut up and given out as souvenirs.
So really from the moment.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
Biographies about, there's thousands of books written about Lincoln, and they started back in the late 1860s. Pieces of the wallpaper at the Peterson house where he died, people took pieces of the wallpaper. It really has become a cottage industry. His hair.
But so it's interesting because you can sort of understand that, right? It's the
connection to Lincoln.
Yeah.
It's the closest thing they're going to get to the great man.
Right.
Is something, whether it's a blood relic or his hair or a piece of his clothing. They had the coat he was wearing that night. It's at Ford's Theater. They only take it out periodically for display, and some of that was cut as well. So, yeah, it's really something. And we've handled relics like that in the past.
We're looking at one right now.
Oh, there you go.
It's fascinating to me.
Yeah,
because it is, on the one hand, such a grim, tragic moment,
right?
And yet people still want that connection. We were talking about Kennedy a moment ago. Growing up here, on my drive to work at the Dallas Morning News every day, I drove through Dealey Plaza, and there were never anything less than 100 people there every day to this day.
Yep.
It utterly fascinates me. But the Lincoln fascination, I don't want to say obsession, because it's a fascination. It's a love affair with Lincoln. Yeah. Certainly still revered to this day. You've had many Lincoln items in auctions previous and upcoming. We got a couple sitting in front of us. The axe sitting here.
This was carried by John Emmons. There's an old tag on there.
If you'd like to show it to folks.
It's
much lighter than I thought it was going to be.
There's probably about 5 or 6 of these known. And this is the Lincoln campaign of 1860, Rail Splitters Brigade. Old label on the back identifying John Emmons as the one who carried this. And the Wide Awakes, they started in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm from Connecticut originally, so I have an affection for that area. And they were, I wouldn't say they were a military group, but they had captains and lieutenants who kept them in formation, and they marched with parade actions like this, torches. They wore kepis. They wore oilcloth capes because the oil would sometimes drip. And they would hurrah for Lincoln. There'd be banners. Now, I'm not saying Lincoln attended these. But
they did. The first time, I think, they formed by marching him back to his hotel
that is true.
In 1860 in
Connecticut. But he wasn't always at every event. But this is an iconic piece. And if you are a collector of Lincoln campaign material, it doesn't get much better than this. It really is just wonderful. And this came out of a long-time collection many years ago, and we were really pleased to get it.
Let me show folks who, Tommy, if you want to cut the camera here in front of me so folks can actually see the axe. There you go. It's much lighter than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be an axe.
A real axe.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to carry that in a parade.
It is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, they would have parades in New York City. I mean, there's some amazing stories about the size of these parades, and it helped propel Lincoln to the presidency.
That's right. So that sold in the last auction as well.
Correct? Yeah, in September 25th.
Right. Sold for $87,000.
No, I think it went for. Did it go?
$87,500.
$87,500,
which is extraordinary.
Yeah, we were very pleased, and the new owner is going to be thrilled.
And it got a little airtime too,
and it got some airtime.
Never hurts.
Yep,
it's immortalized on YouTube for forever.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But look. So one thing during the auction in September, I was not surprised when the broadside sold for what it did when it set a record. Certainly expected it to, although I know you were I assume everybody here is a little nervous before every auction.
Always. I can't sleep the 2 nights before.
So when the thing that surprised me, however, was the china from the Lincoln White House.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise to me as well. More often than not, you find plates, and most plates sell in the $10,000 to $15,000 range. We did sell a similar platter in the first Tom Houston sale. It was larger, and that one realized $62,500.
And this was the celery platter.
We call it
celery.
Yeah, celery platter, asparagus platter. We had 2 very active bids. We had several bidders on it up to a certain point. Then we had 2 very active bidders on it. And unfortunately, the people that didn't win it, they really wanted it, but they had their level they could go to, and that was it. And it's rare. It's rare as hen's teeth. I've never seen one before, and I've seen a lot of Lincoln china. You see teacups, you see
Demi-Tasse?
There you go.
There you go.
And you'll
I'm
see,
not that smart, so it took me a second too.
that was very good. Egg holders, but
Yeah.
when this was found, the woman's really wonderful. She lives in California. It was her, she remembers it as a child. It was her grandmother's and had been in the family for years. After her grandmother passed, it went to her mother. And then when her mother passed, it was up in a closet and she was moving things around in her mother's home, and there it was.
Did she know what it was?
She was always told it was a piece of Lincoln White House china. And when she emailed the photos to us, my coworker, Don Ackerman, who's retired but does come back to catalog sometimes, I think Don almost fell out of his chair. Because I said, Don, this is Lincoln White House china. I've never seen this design before.
Walk me through the authentication process, because I assume I don't know if there's a catalog.
There is.
Is there really?
Yes. I don't remember the name of the reference source offhand, but there is a reference source of what to look for, dimensions, the style, because see, some of these things are made in for gift shops, but they're always on the back. It always says reproduction,
Right.
Lincoln China. But this one, no doubt about it. It's one of the best. It really is.
It's beautiful. It clearly, was well taken care of.
Yes.
Putting things in a closet is never a bad idea.
No. And I'm glad that she found it.
Well, you have actually sitting in front of us another piece of White House china.
Yeah,
this is upcoming.
Yeah, this is from the Rutherford B. Hayes White House. Very ornate White House china from that administration, and they used birds and different animals on the china, and this is a lobster plate, and you see the lobster right in front of it. And I kind of love this piece because my wife and I have a little summer cottage on the coast of Maine.
I feel like you're just showing off.
I'm not showing off. I'm just saying I love lobster. But anyway, I'd love to own this and keep it in our house. I would.
My summer house is also my winter house, is also my spring house,
Well,
also my fall house.
I love the piece, and this is coming up in the Tom Houston sale in December of this year.
Here, let me see that
December
for a
4th and 5th.
second. It is, Tommy, if you'll cut here, if folks want a little closer look at it, I'll hold it up here.
He's upside down.
Oh, he's upside down. Oh, there he is. Sorry. So there you go, right there. And also, here's the back. What are we looking at on the back here?
I think it was made by Limoges, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It's a manufacturer in France. A lot of china from the 19th century was made overseas in France and in England and exported to the United States.
Right.
Very few pieces were made here in the United States.
Yeah, it's all in French on the back.
But that's a great one. It's one of the nicer examples.
And you get obviously this here, the eagle. That's lovely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very nice.
I get very nervous holding things here.
Me too. Yeah, I do.
Once we get done with this, I will run out of here so I don't have to touch anything after this.
The consignor can blame me.
Yeah. Yesterday, I held a Star Trek phaser rifle for 10 seconds, and that was like 9 seconds too long for me.
I heard about that.
It was a dream come true.
Yeah.
As a lifelong Star Trek fan. But as a lifelong Lincoln fan, I'm excited to be talking
And look
about
at William
this guy.
Shatner.
Yeah, yesterday he goes to space. I held his rifle.
90 years old.
Again, that's one of the great thrills about working at Heritage Auctions.
We see a lot of great stuff.
History is never more present than when you're in this building.
Mm-hmm.
So to that end, let's talk about some of this other stuff. Let's talk. Were other Lincoln items in the auction that did extraordinarily well, correct?
We had a great Lincoln banner from Providence, Rhode Island.
Yeah.
That did very well. We also had a banner for Andrew Johnson.
Tommy, can you show that? Because I thought that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and
Stand firm.
Yeah, there's a quote on the back of that banner from Lincoln, and it's not a campaign banner. He never ran. He was impeached. He never ran. He just left office when his term, when he took up the rest of Lincoln's term.
A very tumultuous relationship, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, and when Booth killed Lincoln, he thought he was going to be a hero.
Right.
It was the worst thing that ever happened to the South. They dreaded Johnson. He was not going to be kind and considerate. Lincoln was going to be magnanimous and try to help the South rebuild. And we think that this banner was hung when Johnson gave a speech on Washington's birthday in 1866. That's when we think this was used. Yeah. And it's a wonderful piece of folk art. It had been in the consignor's collection for many years, but he finally decided to part with it, and we were very grateful, and the new owner is going to be thrilled with this piece.
So walk me through I'm fascinated by this piece. And as I am most things in the Americana category, in as much as that when this comes in, the research that goes into this, because there's no photos of it, obviously. Right. So how do you then go about sort of uncovering its place in American history?
Well, we look at it to make sure it's authentic.
Sure.
You look at the material. There's been a lot of reproductions, especially with Lincoln ribbons. They're all over the internet. And the new ones are made of nylon, and some people call it acetate. The ones from Lincoln's period, they were made of silk.
Right.
And you hold them in your hand, you can tell right away which is good and which is bad. So we look at the material, we make sure it looks period. We look at the painting, we look at the style of the painting on the banner, because this is a hand painted banner.
Mm-hmm.
And then we determine, yes, this makes sense. This is an authentic mid 1860s piece.
Right. So then how do you go about placing its moment and know that this is something that would have been used during that speech in 1866?
Well, we know he gave a speech on Washington's birthday in 1866 in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
So, you put your heads together and say, what could this represent besides that? And that's how we really came to that determination.
Right.
And we don't know exactly, but we have a feeling that's when it was used.
How much time do you spend, and this is for my edification as much as for the viewers, how much time do you spend going back to old newspaper clips, going back to old archives? I mean, that to me is as a journalist, that was the best part of my job.
Yeah,
learning
absolutely.
about these moments.
We can use the internet, but we have a huge library here at Heritage, and we have so many reference sources that we can just look through. There's a book called Lincoln Day by Day,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of chronicles Lincoln's timeline from the early 1809, 1810, all the way to his death. So that is also a research, especially if we're dealing with letters and, someone writing a letter saying, I was with President Lincoln on June 5th, 1863. You can go to June 5th, 1863, or around that area, and you might be able to find Lincoln was with Mr. Smith at that time.
Right.
So our reference sources are excellent here at Heritage, and we use them all the time.
And certainly over the years, we've sold a number of Lincoln letters and a number of things referencing Lincoln
Yes.
that also help piece together that puzzle.
Yeah. I don't know if we've ever handled any, but once in a while, a letter will come on the market that's written by somebody who was actually at Ford's Theater when he was assassinated.
Really?
Yeah. I've seen some well-documented letters. There was no doubt that person was there. Yeah, that's a pretty seminal piece when you find a letter like that. Written by just anybody, Joe Smith in the audience. Saw Booth jump down, run out the back door.
I find that stuff extraordinary.
Yeah.
As a lover of American history and nonfiction, I find this stuff to be immensely extraordinary. So there's Lincoln's actually sitting in front of you.
Yes.
So let's talk about
Did
these.
you want to hold it? Did you want to?
Well, yeah. So I'll Yeah, people can hear us.
Oh, good. Okay.
People can hear us. We are unmuted. You may want to say what these are one more time.
Campaign ferrotypes or tin types. Try not to hold. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And they were a form of campaign material, lapel devices, they call them, and you would attach it to your lapel in support of your candidate. And what's unusual about these is not only the great condition, is the size. They're 45 millimeters, which is a very large campaign ferrotype.
Right.
And these are part of the Tom C. Houston collection that's going to be auctioned off on December 4th and 5th.
So talk to me about the Houston collection.
Tom, very nice man. I've become somewhat friendly with him over the last year and a half. Myself and Tom Slater went and met with him last year, talked about his collection, and he decided to consign it to Heritage. And this will be the second installment of Tom's collection. And he's been a collector since the early 1950s. Very nice man. I really enjoy his company.
Really?
Yeah, nice guy.
So I'm fascinated when collectors who have been clearly so much in love with their decide it's time to part with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've talked to any number of consigners over the last year and a half that I've been here, and they talk about the fact that it's time for somebody else to own the history that they have collected.
Right.
That we are all but temporary caretakers.
Custodian, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's all we are.
Our connection is for those watching. Thanks for sticking through this. We'll go back to this view. Here we go. People can see us.
Okay.
But you're right. We're only temporary custodians of this material. And in Tom's case and in other collectors' cases, they feel, it's time for let other collectors enjoy my items.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing right now with Tom's material.
I find that to be such an interesting sort of, perspective, because on the one hand, these things are very difficult to get a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
These things, the fact that any of these things survive as long as they do amazes me. And I'm always amazed that they're not in museums. So when they are in personal collections, is it difficult? I assume part of your job is also sort of convincing people that it's okay to let go of this stuff.
Yes, yeah.
And that it's good to share with American.
Absolutely. A lot of people will donate their collections to a museum. I don't tell people that's a wrong thing to do,
Yeah.
but a lot of times their material may just get put in the back room and never be enjoyed by anybody. The Smithsonian has a wonderful collection, political collection, and I understand that they do a little rotating. They'll move things in and out, so new materials put out there. But there's some institutions will just put it in the back and maybe once in a while take it out. And the general public doesn't get a chance to enjoy it. So when collectors are ready to part with their collection and they want to do business with, say, Heritage, they come to us, they say, I want a new generation of collectors to enjoy my material. And we try and help them do that.
What's the most surprising thing in the last year and a half that's come to auction, that's come to you? Is there something that you thought you'd never see? And to that end, is there something that you're also kind of waiting for that you have yet to see?
That's a good question. I don't.
Besides the picture.
I'll tell you. This is a great story. We have to tell this story. Get a call. I see somebody post something on a website, where people go and look at different things. I guess you call it
the internet?
No, but it wasn't. I don't think it was Facebook. It was some other site. And she said, "Oh, I found this photograph. I don't know much about it." And I almost fell over. So I sent her a private message. I said, "This is what you have," and she ended up consigning it to us.
Yeah.
It was a photograph from the Mohawk Wide Awakes up in upstate New York. They had all their wide awake outfits on, carrying torches.
The folks who carried the axe.
Very similar. Yeah. And they had a huge banner of a full standing Lincoln. And it said Lincoln for president.
Wow.
And it was just unbelievable. This woman found it in an antique shop. I'm not going to tell anybody what she paid for it, but it ended up selling, I think, hammering for over $17,000.
Wow.
So it wasn't the most expensive item I've ever handled, but the story behind it and the rarity of the piece was just an extraordinary moment.
But is there a thing that exists and it maybe has been to auction once, it maybe never been to auction, maybe it's something you've heard about? I mean, certainly in every category here, there's a holy grail. And it used to be the 52 Mantle, it used to be the T206 Wagner, it used to be action number one.
I mean, holy grails in the political collecting arena are, Lincoln portrait flags. If you can find a Lincoln portrait flag with Lincoln and Johnson on it, or Lincoln and Hamlin, both their images, that would just be, record setting right off the bat. But yeah, I would say.
Do they not exist?
I don't believe that. There may be others out there. I'm not sure. I haven't seen one personally, but that would be something that I would think would be, that would kind of blow my mind.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Kennedy. I mean,
Okay.
we just talked about Kennedy, and again, when you live in Dallas your entire life, as I have, John Kennedy is as much a part of your DNA as the concrete of the city that you walk drive through. So tell me about what we have here. You actually can hold it up right there.
These three buttons were made by a gentleman named Frank Allen in New York, and he was friends with Joe Kennedy, Ambassador Kennedy, the father of the future president.
There you go. Pull it up right here so folks can see it.
We'll put it,
Yeah, right there.
okay.
Because that's the camera angle we're using at the moment.
So
We have a connection that has kind of gone wonky on us, so we're operating from. There you go.
So he also made the famous PT-109 pins. He also made pens for Kennedy. So when he made these buttons, there's actually another one that we auctioned off in our last sale called Democracy for Kennedy, and this came from the same consigner. He went up to Joe Kennedy's house in Hyannisport, showed him the buttons. Mr. Kennedy hated them. He said, "My son looks dead in these buttons," and it said that he threw them across the room. And they never went into any more production. So there's only a handful of these known. And when they come on the market, whether you're a general collector, or a Kennedy collector, these are just almost like a cornerstone in your celluloid button collection. And we were just so thrilled to get the other three from our consigner. And these are going to go into our June sale of next year.
What is the estimate on those?
We feel this is actually one of the scarcer ones right here. They're estimated in the $10,000 range.
Yeah. Look, so to that end, I am fascinated by the political button because, as you said, that's the thing you got involved in first that made you fall in love with it, the Kennedy button. Certainly, you go to any antique store in America, any antique mall, there are hundreds of campaign buttons, presidential buttons. People buy them for any number of reasons. They're a candidate they're supported. It's a joke button. It's like, oh man, I can't believe I have a Ross Perot for president button. I have a Ross Perot for president shirt still to this very day. You're free to auction.
You want me to auction it off?
I'd love to consign it. It looks today like it did the day I bought it because it just struck me as something I should own.
That's cool. Yeah.
But I do sort of wonder, are there buttons that I assume people ask you all the time, what should I buy? What are the things that are doing best? You know, it's interesting. We always tell people, don't buy stuff for an investment, buy it because you love it.
That's what I tell people.
So that, but are there buttons out there that you know are incredibly rare? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, there's buttons called Cox Roosevelt Jugends, where it has from 1920 has an image of James Cox for president and a young 38-year-old Franklin D. Roosevelt for vice president.
Yeah,
they say there's only about 50 of all known different varieties, and they can sell. I mean, I know private sales of over $150,000 for one.
Really?
Yeah.
We're back on to me. Let me.
Sorry, I don't know until it's dying. It just shuts down.
So there's not many of those, but I tell people, and I do get people saying, "Hey, what should I bid on?" I said, "Well, what do you like? Do you like buttons? Do you like 3D material? Do you like White House China? Do you like 3D axes, ferrotypes? You know what type of pieces do you like?" And if someone says, "Well, I like big showy display pieces," I said, "Well, that banner or that statue would be great for you. If you like political buttons, this is a classic button. Doesn't show up very often."
Right.
And I tell people, try to buy the best condition they can. Now, once in a while, something will come up that is, quote, unique. And sometimes you have to buy it, even if it has condition problems, because you can't find another one out there. But I always tell people, buy what you like and buy it in the best condition you can afford.
So it's funny. I assume you get more folks asking for appraisals probably now than you ever have in the last year and a half.
We have.
Are there things that have come up that you find are more that people commonly own that are like, this is the thing you should just keep? This is
well, I don't. Of course, we're in the business of selling collectibles.
Sure.
And it's my job to get consignments for the company. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to have. I don't want someone to reluctantly give us their material.
Right.
They're going to feel horrible, and it's a lose-lose situation for us and for that person, because you just don't want to. You want to have a nice, clean deal with somebody. You want to make sure they're comfortable in consigning. Trust the company, and that they're ready to part with the material.
Right.
I mean, I have plenty of collector friends who talk about consigning, but they're just not ready. And I don't push them. I mean, I mentioned to them, hey, the market's hot right now. Like women's suffrage is very hot right now.
That's what I want to. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that we've discussed a great deal.
Right.
Why is that?
The 19th Amendment was passed just about 100 years ago, a year or two ago, and we've seen the prices just go dramatically. We had a banner in our last auction that was owned by a suffragette in Chicago.
I remember that. It was quite an extraordinary piece.
It was a great item, and the new owner is going to be thrilled with it. It's just a great piece, and it's nice that you can have the association with the person who owned it. That makes it extra special.
So that also is an interesting thing, because obviously the axe here, we talked about, we know who owned it.
Right.
I sort of do wonder, in your category, how important is that, the ownership, the lineage to a particular person who may have owned it or who may have made it?
Oh, provenance.
Yeah.
Provenance is everything. You're buying the item, but you're buying the story and any other information that goes along with it
Right.
that proves that it's that piece. And so we take that very seriously, especially with the banner. When I found out it was owned by Bertha Bauer in Chicago, she was a Republican powerhouse, a suffragette businesswoman known throughout the town, and that story behind the banner is just makes it even better. It really does.
Are there other categories or other items? We talk about the women's suffragette items are doing very well. Lincoln, as we've discussed,
Right.
are doing very well, whether it's White House, China. Are there other things? I know banners and flags certainly have
Yes.
been very, very popular. But are there other categories that are perhaps at this point underrepresented that you think should be doing and could be doing better?
Categories in the political collectible
Yeah.
area? Well, I'll tell you, some celluloid buttons that 10 or 15 years ago used to sell for $700 or $800 are now selling in the $200 price range. eBay showed that a lot of items were not as scarce as we thought.
That's a fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, because I don't collect them really any longer, but I collected Lincoln Cartavisites and Lincoln CDVs. And if I saw one once or twice a year at a photo show or in an auction, I was lucky. When eBay came along 22 years ago, whatever it was, I was seeing one a week. And that hurt the prices a little bit.
All right, we have a question.
Okay.
The question is being asked by Defender of the U.S. Constitution. That's how they're identifying themselves.
All right.
Presidential memorabilia, photographs, and plates, etc., are valuable. Do presidential stamps from different countries have any historical value?
I don't believe so. I'm not I don't get into stamps.
Well, stamps, as I understand it, aren't what we thought they were 40, 50, 60 years ago in terms of the value. Stamps, we don't offer stamps at Heritage.
We don't do it any longer.
Right. We did at one point.
Yeah. The market changed on that. It didn't grow. And as collectors sold their collections and passed away, there were no new collectors coming in to pick up the mantle. And I think that's what kind of might have happened with the stamp
Really?
market. Yeah. That's my opinion. I mean, I haven't been to a stamp show in years, but I went to one about 8 or 9 years ago, and it was not well attended, and there were very few dealers. And most of the dealers were older than me. And the market there's still a market for it.
Right.
But I wish I had a better answer for you, sir, but I don't know much about that. Ma'am, pardon me, it's true. I don't know much about that market. I don't want to give you any wrong advice.
So, in the upcoming auctions, I'm wondering, I assume that you learn a great deal about, I know you learn a great deal about American history throughout the course of each auction.
Yes.
Do you find that there are things that have crossed your path in the last year or year and a half that have changed your perception of somebody or something you thought you knew a great deal about? For instance, you have sitting in front of you this Eugene Debs button.
Gene Debs. This is a rare button. It's a little over 3 inches tall.
You want to? Can I show that here?
Yeah,
Linda? Can you cut to this?
That's going to be in Tom C. Houston sale in December. Very unusual in that size. I mean,
hold it up right there.
Debs is a perennial favorite with collectors. I believe he ran 5 times for president. And he was really on the national stage. His last campaign, he ran from jail in 1920.
Right.
So he's a very popular candidate with collectors, and his material can command a premium price versus other more known candidates, Republicans or Democrats.
Well, Debs is such a fascinating character.
Yeah.
I mean, books about, movies about Debs.
Yeah.
Conversion from being a Democrat to being a socialist to being jailed for sedition, for opposition to World War I.
Right.
That to me, I guess, is what, when we think of Americana, I think even those of us in the building tend to think of American history or political, or we think of presidential, or we think of these particular moments. But to me, a figure like Debs is as interesting. And I look at that and I go, I want to know more about Debs. There's an extraordinarily fascinating piece about him recently, and he's sort of being reevaluated in recent years. Great piece in the New Yorker recently about Debs. The biography of Debs, which is really interesting, talks about his speaking voice, one of the greatest American orators, and yet there exists no audio recording of Debs ever having spoken.
That's surprising, considering he lived to, I think, 1926.
Not any audio. No one, as far as I know.
Okay.
But people have described his speaking voice as he could speak, very softly. He could speak very loudly. He could be he could be the most persuasive speaker, and yet no one has ever heard a recording of him, at
There
least
are-
as far as I know.
There are collectors out there who just specialize in Debs.
Are there really?
Oh yeah, and socialist candidates. There's collectors out there. I have a nice guy I know very well. He just moved from upstate New York down to South Carolina. He collects pre-presidential guys who became president. So he collects them when they were running for Congress,
Really?
for senator, mayor, or whatever. And they're and that's what he collects, and that's all he collects. So people do specialize in Debs. You know, being one of the most famous third-party candidates is highly coveted by specialists and also general collectors.
Are there any other figures? And I don't want to say that Debs is he's certainly well known. He's certainly, in fact, I think in many ways misunderstood. Are there other figures that you find that people are collecting as well that they might not have collected 10, 15 years ago? Are there figures who have emerged in the collecting category?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question. I know a couple of collectors who now specialize in Ronald Reagan.
Really?
Yeah, Reagan is a very popular people collect. Bill Clinton buttons are
For real?
Absolutely.
Why is that?
He's a popular president. I mean, he was very charismatic. I mean, no matter what your political side is. I had a friend who lived up in Hartford. He was an attorney, and he was a big supporter of President Clinton. And when Clinton was running for president in '92, he went to a fundraiser, and when Clinton came in the room, it was like the air got sucked out. He's a big man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not a little guy.
I met him when he was he and Gore were campaigning in Corsicana.
Okay, not as, a big husky fella. And he said that he spoke to the waiter the same way he talked to a chairman of the board of a major corporation. And you just couldn't, he said, you couldn't keep your eyes off the guy. And he's become very popular with collectors. So Reagan, Jimmy Carter, people adore Jimmy Carter.
Right.
He's the longest living president now. The things he's done after his presidency are just remarkable, both he and his wife. So he used to teach Sunday school.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I think still does.
No, I don't think.
Oh, no.
I think it's
until recently.
Yeah, but up and not too long ago, into his mid-90s. But there are some later candidates that have emerged as very collectible. And part of there's a club called the American Political Items Collectors, and they have subsets in there where they have the Clinton chapter, the Teddy Roosevelt chapter, the Jimmy Carter chapter. And when we have these big meetings, these national meetings like we just had in Nashville, these collectors all get together and trade buttons, sell buttons, tell stories about the president, why they like him, what they didn't like.
Right.
So there are a lot of subsets in the world of political collecting when these people specialize certain candidates.
Do you find that the modern moment impacts the interest in the past? If something happens today that brings people back to a particular, certainly as the name Reagan has been bandied about for many different reasons over the last few years.
Right.
I sort of wonder, does that impact the interest in or collectability of a particular figure?
Yeah, I think people who are my mom's age, let's say, they can think back to Eisenhower and Kennedy, and maybe they thought it was a simpler time back then. I go back as far as the Reagan-Carter era. And I remember as a kid, my father, he was a great man, but he would, when Carter said, I think he said, put a sweater on, turn your thermostat down. My father took that to heart. And if we left a light on in our bedroom and we weren't in there, we got 25 cents taken off our allowance. We had to wear a sweater in the house. My father really went with that. But I'm digressing a little bit, but.
But it all kind of links back together, and I think that's what we're kind of getting at, right? The American story unfolds every second of every day.
Absolutely.
And therefore it impacts the interest in or collectability of a particular thing. I'd like to, for instance, love to find a sign from the gas shortage of the 70s.
I remember though. That's right. Yeah.
If there was an original sign that had been in a gas station near my house, I'd love to know something like that. Mark asks a question here. I'm a longtime collector of historical memorabilia. As discussed, some of the recent auction results have gone through the roof. Are the buyers new to the market? Are they from the outside of the United States, or are they investors? Can you talk about some of these new buyers?
What's good about Heritage is we do a lot of cross marketing, and we recently sold 2 collections of George Washington 1789 inaugural buttons.
Right, that's another thing we should certainly talk about.
And we cross-marketed to the coin buyers at Heritage, and we're finding that some of the buyers were coin buyers that we never had before.
Really?
And I think they look at them, okay, they're the size of a button, a size of a coin. They look kind of like a coin. The link states button for Washington, there's a similar button in numismatics.
Really?
So I think we've gotten a lot of migration from that collecting genre over to political collecting, and I think it's going to continue.
Well, coin collectors have historically been drawn to the Washington buttons, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Some of the best coin collectors in the world have Washington inaugural buttons.
Right.
Which, and I have to say, I'm so fascinated by them because there are a lot.
Mhm.
There was one point about a year ago, I was writing about them. I dove into a website about them. There were a lot. And some of them were very rare and some of them were a little more common than others. Is there a holy grail of Washington button?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but a Patra Petri, the one that we sold recently in this last auction, I think it realized about 200,000.
Yeah.
So that's really the holy grail for collectors. But collectors can also get Washington inaugural buttons from that same period for $3,500, $4,000, $5,000, and nice examples as well. And we've sold 2 really great collections recently. And over the last, I'd say, year of Washington buttons, and they've been really holding their value very well.
Have they? You said they've held their value. I assume they've gone up, right? I mean,
some have, yeah. Some have.
They're not making any more.
They're not making any more of them, no. But what happens in this business is if something comes out to the market and sells for a big number, usually the next one that comes out does not. And it can go down and down and down. But remarkably, the last 2 big collections we sold really held their value. And I think that goes to the testament of heritage and the cross-marketing and how we promote the items and how we photograph the items and describe the items. What I tell consigners, and it may sound old-fashioned, but if it's properly described, properly photographed, and properly marketed, we're going to reach the target audience. And it's going to sell for what the market value is at that current time. Auctions are a snapshot in time. A price can be different on June 1st from one on June 30th. It just depends who's in the market. The guy who bought the button on June 1st, he's out of the market right now. So there's a smaller pool of buyers. So that's why we have to make sure that we market these items to collectors in different genres over the course, over the categories that we have here at Heritage, especially George Washington buttons to the coin fellas.
Is now a good time to sell Washington buttons if you have them?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there something that the market is just waiting for, that the market is ripe for?
An unknown Lincoln flag.
Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to those few grail and unknown items. I ask only as much as if somebody's watching this and goes, I'm eager to consign a thing. If I had that thing, man, I really should bring it in. And it may not be the rarest thing ever.
Right. Teddy Roosevelt is a very popular collector.
There you go. That's what I mean.
Whether it's a Teddy Roosevelt pennant, a Teddy Roosevelt bandana, a rare button. There are folks out there that specialize just in Teddy Roosevelt. That's all they buy. And there's collectors out there who only buy material from his 1912 campaign. There's collectors out there who only buy from his 1904 campaign. So Teddy Roosevelt's always hot, especially buttons that don't come on the market very often. And that's the key. Material, excellent material and great condition that doesn't appear on the market very often tends to command high premiums.
Kind of reminds me of that old Jim Morrison thing. He's hot, he's sexy, he's dead. Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt.
Lee asks, are people collecting medals?
Like campaign, if he's talking about campaign tokens and campaign medals?
I don't want to say, I'm going to pronounce exonumia, correct?
Exonumia is another term for that. It's interesting. We have the DeWitt collection coming up in next year. And it was owned by J. Doyle DeWitt, who is chairman of the board of the Travelers Insurance Company. And he was an avid collector of 19th century material dating back to George Washington. And he has in that collection are some amazing, we call them tokens or medals, exonumia, but of Andrew Jackson, of Lincoln. I mean, true rarities. And he collected this stuff for many years. Now, he died in 1972, and Heritage is lucky enough, we have the collection.
Wow.
And we're going to have an inaugural sale in spring of next year of all of Mr. DeWitt's, most of his material. And we have very, very high expectations for it. And again, metals are very hot, especially not only with political collectors, but also coin buyers.
Wow. Well, if anybody has any further questions, we're going to wrap it up here in a second. tell people how to get a hold of you. We should do that. We should have done that up front. I know people are watching and they'll be able to keep watching. So what's the best email address for you?
My email is curtisl@ha.com. It's curtisl@ha.com. And my direct line is 214-409-1352. And feel free to reach out to me anytime. No question is stupid. I love answering questions. Don't ask me anything.
Clearly, no question is stupid because I'm good at asking stupid questions.
No, I mean, some people say, "Geez, can I ask you this question?" I would say, "Sure." I mean, I still ask questions, and I've been buying and selling this type of material for 40 years. So I'm always welcome to hearing from people. And thank you very much for attending. And thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Look, as a journalist, you always said there's no stupid question. There's only a stupid answer.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. And hopefully, I won't give those out.
Chad asks, are you ever saddened by the breaking up of a collection? Which I think is a great question, because certainly it's been fascinating over the years that the year and a half I've been here to watch, here's all these things I've spent my life.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yes. I'm saddened right now. I am.
By what?
A friend's collection that's being broken up.
Really?
Yeah. But it's for personal reasons.
So
we were friends.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So,
but let's put it this way: most people who want to sell their collection, they want to at least break even. They'd love to make money on it. I mean, we buy it because we love it, but we want to be able to, when we sell it, do well with it.
But you also want to share it.
And we want to share it with future collectors or new collectors. So most collections do get broken up. It's just the nature of the beast. Mm-hmm. But I'd say there's only one collection that I'm a little saddened about. Yeah. But otherwise, I'm not. People tell me, Curtis, I want it to go out to the masses.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? I talked the other day to John Azarian, who's selling his entertainment collection. He spent his whole life collecting some of the most extraordinary props from TV and film. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain point at which you change direction. I bought all these things from my shows I love. Now I want to collect from this other thing. And I don't want to be a hoarder.
Right.
You got to share it, right?
Right.
So people, that's why what makes this place great is that you can come here and find a thing you love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, man, I can't tell you how much I love talking to you.
Oh, I like talking to you as well.
You're just such a thoughtful, smart man about some very important moments in American history.
Don't tell anybody about that.
I will try not to. But man, I can't tell you.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thanks everybody for watching. This has been a tremendous pleasure. Thanks for bearing through a couple of technical difficulties. If you have questions, curtisl@ha.com. Thanks, Tommy, for doing such a remarkable job directing. And we'll do another one of these shortly.